Greetings, dear friends. Today, I invite you on an exciting journey into the world of ancient Greek mythology to explore the life of one of the most iconic figures of the ancient epic, Hercules. This hero is famed not only for his astonishing physical strength, but also for his human frailties, which make his story both majestic and profoundly human. Hercules is a symbol of resistance to evil, atonement for guilt, and the pursuit of self-overcoming. But why do the myths of Hercules, born thousands of years ago, continue to captivate us to this day? It's not just about his accomplishments, which include battles with monsters and the completion of impossible tasks. The story of Hercules is a reflection of humanity's eternal battle against chaos, inner demons, and fate. Today, I will examine his 12 great labors, each of which represents not only a physical test, but also a metaphor for human qualities such as perseverance, wisdom, agility, and of course, courage. I will also delve into Hercules' life beyond the labors, his servitude to Omphale, the tragic events with Deianira, and his ascension to Olympus, where he attained immortality. This lecture is not just a retelling of ancient Greek legends. It is an opportunity to take a fresh look at a story that teaches us that even the greatest heroes face hardships and make mistakes. I will show how strength and weakness, victories and defeats shape a personality capable of becoming a legend. Make yourselves comfortable as I begin our captivating lecture about Hercules, the man who became a god and the hero whose exploits will continue to inspire generations to come. Let's delve into the story of how Hercules, half mortal, half god, began his life in astonishing circumstances. Together, let us immerse ourselves in the myth where love, deception, and a grand destiny intertwine. It all begins with Zeus, the supreme god of Olympus, who possessed not only boundless power, but also an insatiable passion for mortal women. His gaze fell upon Alcmene, the wife of Amphitryon, the ruler of Thebes, and a valiant warrior who was away on a military campaign at that time. Alcmene was not only beautiful, but also intelligent, virtuous, and descended from the illustrious lineage of Perseus, who slew Medusa the Gorgon and founded a dynasty that played an important role in mythology. This lineage was imbued with nobility, glory, and a connection to the gods. Her virtues captivated Zeus, and he decided that their union would produce not an ordinary child, but a hero who would go down in history. But Alcmene, loyal to her husband, would not succumb to persuasion. So Zeus, a master of deception, resorted to trickery. He assumed the form of Amphitryon, who was away on campaign, and came to Alcmene. By Zeus's will, his night with her lasted 3 days and 3 nights. Time slowed down by the god himself so that their union would produce something great. Thus began the story of Hercules, half mortal, half god. When Amphitryon returned from his campaign, he sensed that something was amiss. Alcmene greeted him as if she had already seen him. Confused and bewildered, he sought the advice of the seer Tiresias, who revealed the truth. Zeus had visited their home and left behind an heir. Imagine that shock, to learn that your wife had become part of the god's plans. However, Amphitryon, being a man of honor, accepted the situation and decided to raise the child as his own. Realizing that fate had given him an unusual role, Hercules was not just a child, but the heir to the glorious dynasty of Perseus. Zeus, in a burst of pride, vowed that the first infant born that day from the lineage of Perseus would become a great ruler. Music. The jealous Hera, Zeus's wife, could not allow a child born of a mortal woman to hold such a position. With her divine powers, Hera intervened in the course of events. She delayed Alcmaeon's labor while simultaneously accelerating the birth of Eurystheus, another descendant of Perseus. Thus, thanks to Hera's treachery, Eurystheus was born first and received the throne that should have belonged to Hercules. However, this was just the beginning of Hera's intrigues. When Hercules was born, Hera sent 2 enormous snakes to kill the infant. But even then, his incredible strength manifested itself. The baby grabbed the snakes with his hands and strangled them. This episode was the first sign that Hercules was born for great deeds. Hercules grew up under the protection of his earthly father, learning the art of war. Even though he was deprived of the throne, fate had prepared for him a different path to greatness through trials that would make his name immortal. Hercules' life, despite his divine origins, was never easy. From birth, he was under the watchful eyes of the gods, especially the jealous Hera. But the greatest trials awaited Hercules in the future, when he was forced to endure incredible hardships and prove his strength, intelligence, and resilience. To understand why the great hero was punished and forced to perform his famous labors, let's delve into one of the most dramatic chapters of his biography. Hercules' fame as a protector of the weak began to spread throughout Greece. He was not just strong, he embodied the ideal of a hero capable of fighting any danger. But Hera, who was haunted by his existence, was not going to leave him in peace. At some point, Hercules' fate intersected with the beautiful Megara, daughter of King Creon of Thebes. Hercules married her, and it seemed that after all the early trials, his life had finally found peace. However, Hera intervened again, shattering this peace. She decided that this time, her blow should be particularly cruel. Hera inflicted madness upon Hercules. In this state, he lost the ability to distinguish between reality and illusion. Blinded by rage, music, he committed what became the heaviest burden in his life. He killed his own children, and, according to some versions of the myth, even his wife. When his mind finally cleared, he saw what he had done and was plunged into deep grief. It was this moment that became the turning point in his life. Overwhelmed by guilt, Hercules went to Delphi to consult the oracle of Apollo for advice. He sought atonement for his deeds. The oracle declared that the only way to cleanse himself of this sin was to submit to Eurystheus, the king of Mycenae, and carry out his orders. Why Eurystheus in particular? This was a direct consequence of Hera's intervention. Eurystheus, born slightly earlier than Hercules thanks to her trickery, became the ruler, while Hercules was deprived of his birthright. Now Hercules, though superior to Eurystheus in every way, was forced to obey his commands. This was a real humiliation for the great hero. Eurystheus, fearing Hercules' strength, decided to assign him the most dangerous and impossible tasks. Thus was born the story of the 12 labors, which became a test not only for the hero's body, but also for his spirit. These tasks were conceived as punishment, but they transformed Hercules into an immortal legend. Thus, Hercules' labors became not just a series of incredible adventures, but also a story of redemption. Each step was a step toward forgiveness and an understanding that even the greatest heroes are not immune to mistakes. Now, let's examine together how he performed his labors step by step, starting with the first, which became a real challenge to his strength and will after meeting King Eurystheus, who became for Hercules the embodiment of hostile fate. The hero headed to the Peloponnese. It was here that a series of great trials began, which forever inscribed his name in the history of myths. The first task Hercules received immediately called into question the very possibility of its completion. He was to kill the Nemean lion. a monstrous beast whose hide was invulnerable to any weapon. Nemea, a small region in the southern Peloponnese, suffered from constant terror. The locals said that this lion was the offspring of the darkest forces. According to one version of the myths, it was the offspring of Typhon and Echidna. Its shiny and dense hide was granted by the gods, and no spear, sword, or arrow could pierce it. Any attempt to kill the beast ended in tragedy, and the lion itself destroyed everything in its path. It devoured livestock and people with equal cruelty, leaving behind ruins and fear. Rumors of the Nemean lion spread throughout Greece, and no one dared to stand against it. Only one person could take on such a dangerous task: Hercules. Although he understood the difficulty of the trial, he accepted the challenge, for he could not retreat before his destiny. Arriving in Nemea, Hercules began studying the beast's tracks. He found out that the lion was hiding in a cave with 2 exits. Its lair was cleverly arranged. If someone tried to attack it, it simply disappeared through the second exit. Hercules, observing the beast's habits, began to develop a strategy. He realized that it was impossible to defeat such an enemy without cunning. First, he tried to use his weapons. Hercules drew his bow and fired several arrows at the lion, but they bounced off its hide as if it were a stone wall. Then, he decided to close one of the cave's exits with a huge stone to corner the beast. Now, the lion had no way to retreat. When the lion returned to the cave, Hercules was waiting for it in ambush. He knew that no weapon would help him in this battle, and the only way to defeat the beast was his incredible strength. Feeling the threat, the beast pounced on the hero. Their clash was truly grandiose. Man and monster fought as equals. The lion tried to tear Hercules with its claws, but the hero, using all his agility, dodged and, seizing the moment, grabbed the beast by the throat. His mighty hands, like iron vices, began to squeeze the lion's neck. Despite all its power, the beast could not break free. Its breathing grew weaker until it froze. After the victory, Hercules decided he had to take something to prove his triumph. He tried to skin the lion, but even here he faced an obstacle. Ordinary knives and swords could not cut through it. Then Hercules used the beast's own claws to flay the skin. This trophy became not only proof of his victory, but also protection for the future. The hide was impenetrable. Hercules wore it as armor and used the lion's head as a helmet. The image of Hercules in the lion's skin became legendary. This attribute symbolized not only his strength, but also his ability to overcome impossible obstacles. The hero turned the threat into protection and the monster into a symbol of his triumph. The victory over the Nemean lion was of great importance. It was Hercules' first labor, and it immediately showed the world that this hero was not only strong, but also intelligent, decisive, and ready to accept any challenge. He not only destroyed the monster, but also returned the peaceful life to the inhabitants of Nemea. This feat became the beginning of his path to immortal glory. After his victory over the Nemean lion, Hercules, covered in glory, returned to King Eurystheus, but instead of praise, he received a new, even more dangerous challenge. This time, he was sent to the swampy area of Lerna, where a monster that instilled fear even in the bravest warriors lived, the Lernaean Hydra. This creature, possessing many heads, personified chaos and destruction, and its venom poisoned the land, water, and the very air. The Lernaean Hydra was no ordinary monster. It came from the very darkness of ancient myths. Its parents were Typhon and Echidna, who spawned an entire army of monsters. The Hydra lived in a cave in the middle of a swampy plain. Its heads, the number of which varied in the myths from 9 to 50 or even 100, had a terrible property. As soon as one was cut off, two new ones grew in its place. One of the heads was immortal, which made the Hydra virtually invulnerable. Its breath was deadly poisonous, and drops of blood could poison the earth forever. Hercules understood that the battle with the Hydra would not be like the battle with the lion. This time, he took with him Iolaus, his nephew, a young and quick-witted companion, ready to support the hero at any moment. They took torches, weapons, and a good dose of determination, knowing that this battle would require not only strength, but also cunning. When Hercules and Iolaus reached Lerna, a sinister swamp stretched before them. It seemed alive. Thick poisonous fumes rose above the water, and in the center of the swamp loomed a sinister cave. Hercules decided to lure the Hydra out. He began firing burning arrows into the depths of its lair. After a moment, everything around shook with a furious roar. The monster burst out of the cave. Legend said that no one dared even approach its lair. Even the birds avoided this land, and any creature that fell into the vicinity soon died of poisoning. The Hydra turned out to be even more terrible than the legends described. Its heads writhed, spitting poisonous saliva, and its eyes sparkled with wild rage. Hercules hurled the first arrow, then grabbed his club. With incredible speed, he began to smash one head after another. But then something terrible happened. From each severed neck, two new, even more furious heads instantly grew. Hercules realized that he could not cope without help. Iolaus, watching the battle, guessed that fire could stop the growth of new heads. Grabbing a burning torch, he began cauterizing the Hydra's necks immediately after Hercules cut off the heads. New heads stopped growing, but there remained the immortal head. It was the most ferocious. Thick green smoke poured from its mouth, capable of killing anyone who dared come too close. Hercules fought it with all his might until he finally cut it off, but even then, it continued to hiss and writhe. Hercules buried the immortal head deep in the ground and crushed it with a huge stone so that it would never threaten people again. After the victory, Hercules collected the Hydra's blood. It was a deadly poison, and the hero dipped his arrows into it, making them an incredibly dangerous weapon. These arrows will still play a key role in his future exploits. Eurystheus did not count this feat because Hercules was helped by Iolaus. However, the hero himself knew that he had defeated not only the Hydra, but also the fear of evil, which seemed invincible. This feat became a symbol of cleansing and proof that even the most terrible monster can be defeated if you show ingenuity and courage. The Nemean lion skin, which Hercules carried with him from the first feat, and the Hydra's blood became an excellent addition to the hero's great strength and skill. After the resounding victories over the Nemean lion and the Lernaean Hydra, Hercules was to face a trial requiring not so much strength as patience and agility. Eurystheus, seeking to put the hero in a difficult position, ordered him to capture the Circadian Hind, a sacred animal of the goddess of the hunt, Artemis. The Circadian Hind, also known as the Hind of Artemis, was not just an animal, but a true miracle of nature. Its golden antlers shone in the sun, and its bronze hooves sounded like bells as it raced through the mountains and forests. The hind was sacred to the goddess Artemis, who considered it a symbol of purity and environmental protection. Anyone who dared to harm this animal risked incurring the wrath of the goddess. Eurystheus, knowing about the connection between the hind and Artemis, wanted to put Hercules before a choice. Either he would violate divine law, or he would fail to complete the task. This was a test not only of agility, but also of the hero's moral qualities. The difficulty of the task lay not only in the fact that the hind possessed tremendous speed, allowing it to escape from any pursuer, but also in the fact that it could not be harmed. Even a small scratch could cause Artemis's wrath. For Hercules, this meant that he would have to show not only physical endurance, but also incredible patience and accuracy. Hercules, used to direct confrontation, understood that brute force would be useless this time. He began to track the hind, carefully studying its habits and routes. This hunt stretched for an entire year. Hercules followed the animal's tracks from one mountain range to another, from forests to river valleys, covering vast distances. Every day he faced difficulties, steep climbs, dense thickets, and unbearable heat. But despite all this, he did not give up. Gradually, the hero began to notice patterns in the hind's movements. It loved the morning coolness and often came to the Ladon River. Finally, Hercules caught up with the hind at the river. It was a place surrounded by a dense forest with a slowly flowing river and soft banks, ideal for the animal to rest. Hercules, hiding behind the trees, aimed his bow, trying not to cause the animal serious harm. His arrow slightly touched the hind's leg, slowing its movement. Approaching the weakened animal, Hercules carefully grabbed it, trying not to cause harm. He gently lifted the hind and went to Eurystheus. When Hercules presented the Circadian hind to the king, he was impressed by its beauty, but also frightened by the possible wrath of Artemis. Hercules explained that he had caught the animal alive and unharmed, and emphasized that music, this sacred creation, belonged to Artemis. He skillfully diverted Eurystheus's attention and, having received permission, released the hind, allowing it to return to the goddess's sanctuary. This decision showed that Hercules respected not only the king's orders, but also divine laws. This feat symbolized patience, ingenuity, and the ability to act with respect for nature and the gods. Capturing the Circadian hind became not only a test for Hercules, but also a lesson for all who learned this story. Not always strength solves everything. Sometimes the key to victory is patience and respect. Hercules had just completed the exciting trial with the Circadian hind, but Eurystheus was already preparing him a new, even more dangerous task: to capture the Erymanthian boar. This wild boar, which lived on Mount Erymanthus in Arcadia, was known for its ferocity and destructive power. This animal terrified the inhabitants of the surrounding area, distinguished not only by its enormous size, but also by its incredible strength and aggressiveness. Capturing it alive seemed almost impossible. But Eurystheus, driven by envy and fear of Hercules, hoped that the hero would die trying to complete this task. Hercules realized that he faced a difficult task. People said that the boar destroyed fields, attacked houses, and killed anyone who dared to approach its territory. To defeat such a creature required not only strength and courage, but also cunning. Hercules, armed with a bow, spear, and his famous club, set off into the mountains. He carefully studied the boar's tracks to understand its habits. The hero also learned that in the winter months, deep snow made it difficult for even the most agile beast to move. This fact became key to his plan. Hercules tracked the boar for several days, gradually approaching its lair. Finally, he discovered the beast enjoying the destruction of one of the villages at the foot of the mountain. Without hurrying, the hero began driving the boar higher and higher into the mountains, where the snow was particularly deep. The boar, unable to move quickly, began to tire. Hercules used this moment to throw a strong net over it or tie it with rope, depending on the version of the myth. The beast resisted desperately, but Hercules, with his incredible strength, managed to tame it and tie it up. Hercules heaved the huge boar onto his shoulders, and headed for Mycenae. Seeing Hercules with the giant beast, King Eurystheus was so frightened that he hid in a huge bronze jar, Pythos. This moment became one of the most memorable in the myths of Hercules, symbolizing not only the hero's strength, but also the cowardice of those who tried to humiliate him. However, Hercules' path to success was not without its obstacles. On his way to Erymanthus, the hero stopped at the hospitable home of a centaur named Pholus. The centaur welcomed Hercules to his hearth and offered him rest. As a treat, Pholus offered wine that belonged to all the centaurs. However, as soon as the wine was opened, its aroma spread throughout the surrounding area, attracting other centaurs. The centaurs, smelling the wine, were enraged. They considered this wine sacred and common property, and therefore saw the actions of Pholus and Hercules as an insult. A skirmish began. The centaurs attacked the hero. Hercules, defending himself, unleashed his bow and arrows, poisoned with the venom of the Lernaean Hydra. The battle was fierce, and Hercules was victorious, but not without tragic consequences. One of the poisoned arrows accidentally wounded Chiron, the wise and immortal centaur, teacher of many heroes. Hercules, stunned by his mistake, tried to help, but the Hydra's poison was too strong. Chiron suffered unbearable pain, but could not die, as he was immortal. In the end, Chiron voluntarily renounced his immortal nature, according to various versions, in exchange for the liberation of Prometheus, to find peace. This episode became a harsh lesson for Hercules. His actions led not only to salvation, but also to destruction and the death of an innocent being. The episode with the centaurs highlights the complexity of the moral choices Hercules faced. It was not just a conflict of strength, but also a moment of realization that even the strongest and most valiant heroes are not immune to mistakes and their consequences. The feat with the Erymanthian boar symbolized the taming of wild, untamed nature. Hercules managed to show patience and strategy to deal with it. This feat showed that brute force does not always lead to victory. Sometimes cunning, observation, and the ability to use circumstances to one's advantage are more important. The conflict with the centaurs illustrated how easily chaos can be provoked by disrupting harmony. Hercules learned to accept the consequences of his actions, understanding that great power requires great responsibility. The capture of the Erymanthian boar became not only a test of Hercules' physical strength, but also of his moral qualities. Each of the hero's tasks enriched his experience and brought him closer to understanding his own nature and role in the world. After Hercules had dealt with the most difficult monsters, Eurystheus, perhaps wanting to humiliate the hero, entrusted him with one of the most unexpected and seemingly most absurd tasks: cleaning the Augean stables. This feat, despite its apparent simplicity, is actually an example of how Hercules combined his incredible strength with intelligence and ingenuity. Once, Hercules, at the insistence of his king Eurystheus, was tasked with cleaning the stables of Augeas, the king of Elis, which had not been cleaned for 30 years. Given that these stables housed thousands of cattle, according to various versions 3,000 bulls, the mountains of manure accumulated over the decades made the task practically impossible by traditional methods. However, Hercules approached the solution to this problem with incredible boldness and ingenuity. His plan was to divert the course of two rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, which flowed near the stables. He decided to direct their waters through the stables so that the powerful flow could wash away all the accumulated pollution. This decision was not only bold, but also extremely difficult, as it required control over powerful water flows, which was extremely dangerous. Hercules dug canals or destroyed the walls of the stables on two sides, changing the course of the rivers, and their waters gushed into the stables, cleaning them of all the dirt. In just one day, Hercules coped with this colossal task, and the stables became completely clean. This feat seemed impossible for any other hero, but Hercules, showing all his strength and strategic mind, managed to accomplish it. However, despite the effectiveness of this solution, Heracles' feat was not perceived by everyone as absolutely heroic. Besides, Augeas had promised Heracles a tenth of his cattle for the job, but refused to pay upon learning that it was an order from Eurystheus. Eurystheus, in turn, did not count this feat, as Heracles tried to get paid for it. Some in ancient Greece believed that using natural forces, such as rivers, to complete a task was not exactly what was expected of a hero. Some found it difficult to accept that a feat that was supposed to be a demonstration of human strength and perseverance was actually accomplished through interference with natural processes. This caused controversy, and some believed that Heracles' feat was not pure and noble enough in the traditional sense. Nevertheless, Heracles' feat, in addition to its physical side, had a symbolic meaning. The cleansing of the Augean stables became a metaphor for getting rid of everything bad that had accumulated and overcoming all the obstacles that stand in the way. This feat reminds us that in order to cope with difficulties, you need to use not only your strength, but also your mind. Heracles, as before, showed that even the most impossible tasks can be solved if you use cunning and courage. Thus, this feat became an important milestone in Heracles' life, showing that both strength and intelligence can be applied on the path to victory, a combination that will always lead to success. Heracles' feat in destroying the Stymphalian birds is one of those stories that combines elements of heroism, wit, and even a bit of divine intervention. This sixth labor might have seemed quite simple compared to the previous ones, were it not for one circumstance: the Stymphalian birds themselves, monstrous creatures that Heracles encountered. These birds were not just ordinary feathered creatures, created or raised, according to various versions, by the god of war, Ares himself. They were deadly dangerous to all living things. And although they looked like giant birds, their characteristics made them extremely dangerous. Their feathers were made of bronze and were as sharp as daggers. The birds could hurl them from a height like arrows, striking any target on the ground and causing a real massacre. But what was even more terrible, their beaks and claws were also made of bronze or iron, and so sharp that even a close encounter with them could be fatal to any person or animal. They were ravaging the area around Lake Stymphalus in Arcadia. King Eurystheus, always eager to complicate Heracles' life, considered the destruction of these birds a worthy challenge. Heracles was ordered to go to Lake Stymphalus and put an end to this disaster. The difficulty of the task lay not only in the danger that the birds represented, but also in the difficulty of getting to them. The lake was surrounded by dense forests and swamps that could not be traversed on foot, and the birds themselves hid in the thickets of reeds or in the trees. Arriving at the scene, Heracles realized that he would not be able to approach the birds on the muddy, swampy soil. He stopped and thought, or, according to one version, turned to the temple of Athena for help, the goddess of wisdom and strategy. Athena, admiring his courage or simply wanting to help the son of Zeus, decided to assist the hero. She handed him 2 shimmering bronze tympani, or castanets, or a rattle, created by the divine blacksmith Hephaestus. These instruments made a deafening sound capable of startling anyone. Athena knew that a direct attack on these creatures in their hiding place would be suicidal. When Heracles reached the swamps, he saw an ominous sight. The swampy terrain was littered with bronze feathers that stuck out of the ground like spears. The air was filled with a metallic clang created by the friction of the birds' wings against each other. They were hiding in the thickets, invisible but ready to attack. Hercules realized that not only strength, but also strategy was needed here. He climbed a hill by the lake, set up, or simply took in his hands the timpani and began to beat them. A deafening roar rang out, echoing throughout the area. The birds, accustomed to the silence of the swamps, flew out of their hiding places in a panic. Their neat ranks were broken, and chaos engulfed the flock circling over the lake. Hercules wasted no time. Grabbing his bow, he began to fire arrows one after another. Each arrow found its target, striking the birds in the air. The battle was intense. There were too many of them. Some birds tried to attack the hero, showering him with their deadly feathers, but Hercules, protected by the skin of the Nemean lion, music fended off or dodged, continuing to methodically destroy the enemies. When most of the birds were destroyed or wounded, the remaining ones, in horror, tried to escape, flying as far as possible from this terrible place. According to legend, they flew to an island in the Black Sea and never returned. Hercules did not pursue the fleeing birds. His task was to rid the Stymphalus area of this scourge. After completing the task, Hercules returned to Eurystheus with proof of his victory, perhaps bringing several dead birds. This feat became a symbol of how courage, intelligence, and the support of higher powers can overcome any obstacles. It also reminded people that even in the darkest corners of nature, monsters can hide. But a true hero will always find a way to defeat them. After his success in Greece, Hercules had to prove his glory beyond its borders. His labors were becoming increasingly complex, and King Eurystheus sought challenges that could break even the greatest hero. One such task was the capture of the Cretan bull, an animal that had brought chaos to the famous island. Hercules had just returned to Tiryns after cleaning the Augean stables or exterminating the Stymphalian birds. The order of the labors sometimes varies. Barely having caught his breath, he appeared before Eurystheus, awaiting his next task. Eurystheus, eager to make life difficult for the hero, suggested that he go to Crete. It was said that a huge, ferocious bull was roaming there, terrorizing the inhabitants of the island. It was the same bull that the sea god Poseidon had once given to King Minos. However, the story of the Cretan bull was not just a tale of an animal gone berserk. This bull was linked to divine intrigues and human weakness. King Minos of Crete, vying with his brothers for the throne, prayed to Poseidon to send a sign confirming his right to rule. The sea god responded by revealing from the sea a magnificent snow-white bull, which was to be immediately sacrificed to Poseidon. But, struck by the extraordinary beauty of the animal, Minos spared it and kept it in his herd, sacrificing another bull instead. This decision angered Poseidon. As punishment, he cursed the bull, driving it mad and making it wild and uncontrollable. The bull broke out of the palace herds, began destroying fields and villages, trampling crops, turning into a real disaster for the island. In addition, according to legend, it was this bull, or its madness, sent by Poseidon, that caused the passion of Minos' wife, Pasiphae, for him, from which the monstrous Minotaur was born, later locked in the labyrinth. The inhabitants of Crete believed that the bull was cursed, and that only divine intervention or a great hero could stop it. Hercules accepted the challenge and set off for Crete. A long sea voyage across the dangerous waters of the Aegean Sea awaited him. When the hero arrived on the island, the inhabitants greeted him with pleas for help. Each of them told how the bull had trampled their vineyards, destroyed houses, and killed livestock. Seeing the suffering of the people, Hercules realized that he had to put an end to this chaos. Minos, although he was responsible for the appearance of this disaster, was happy to get rid of it and allowed Hercules to catch the bull. The bull was huge and powerful, its eyes blazing with rage. Finding it turned out to be not easy. The animal hid in the mountains, breaking out into the valleys only to destroy everything in its path. Hercules, as an experienced hunter, tracked the bull for several days before finding it in one of the meadows. When Hercules saw the monster, he realized that a direct attack could be deadly. The hero prepared in advance. He brought strong ropes with him and devised a plan. The bull saw Hercules and furiously charged at him. The hero dodged and then began to maneuver, forcing the animal to run in circles until it tired. After that, Hercules, using his inhuman strength, rushed at it, grabbed it by the horns, and threw it to the ground, tying it with a strong rope. Having captured the bull, Hercules decided not to kill it. Instead, he drove, or even swam with it across the sea, holding it by the horns, the animal to Tyrans. This showed his ability not only to conquer, but also to control chaos. When Eurystheus saw the huge, still ferocious bull, he was seized with panic. He ordered the animal to be immediately removed from his palace. Hercules released the bull, and it continued its wanderings, running through the Peloponnese and Attica, and eventually finding itself in the vicinity of Marathon, where it again began to wreak havoc. Later, another great hero, Theseus, took on the task of saving Marathon from this bull. He found the bull, engaged it in a fierce battle, and defeated it. Then Theseus brought the bull to Athens, where it was sacrificed to the gods, Athena or Apollo, putting an end to its destruction. This feat did not merely demonstrate Hercules' strength. It was a symbol of the hero's ability to tame wild, destructive forces, even those that were born of the wrath of the gods and the mistakes of men. The story of the Cretan bull remains a reminder that even the greatest gifts require responsibility, and broken promises can lead to disaster. After defeating the Cretan bull, Hercules was once again faced with a new challenge. This time, the task from King Eurystheus was even more audacious and dangerous: to travel to the distant lands of Thrace to capture the mares of Diomedes, terrifying man-eating horses that no mortal could tame. These animals, feeding on human flesh, terrorized the entire region. Like all previous tasks, this challenge required Hercules not only strength, but also tremendous courage, resourcefulness, and of course, a readiness for incredible dangers. The story of these horses was inextricably linked to their owner, King Diomedes, the ruler of the warlike tribe of the Bistones in Thrace. Diomedes was the son of Ares and was famous for his extreme cruelty. He chained his mares with copper chains to bronze stalls and fed them the flesh of foreigners who had been shipwrecked off the shores of his kingdom, or simply captured prisoners. These ferocious animals, possibly inheriting wildness from their grandfather Ares, were untamable. Locked in fortified stalls, they were guarded by a large army and instilled fear in everyone who heard about them. The horses tore everything in their path, and their sharp, blade-like teeth could even bite through metal chains. Hercules, accepting the task, set off, gathering a detachment of loyal companions. According to one version, his young lover Abderus was among them. He knew that dealing with the mares and Diomedes would not be easy, so he began gathering information about the fortress and its guards in advance. Reaching Thrace, the hero saw how strongly fortified the mares' stalls were. Diomedes' palace, or fortress, was surrounded by hundreds of warriors, ready to defend their tyrant and his gruesome horses. Under the cover of night, or as a result of a daring attack, Hercules and his detachment made their way to the stalls. While his companions distracted the guards, or after defeating them, he fought with Diomedes himself. A fierce battle ensued, in which the cruel king tried to use his strength and cunning to overcome the hero. However, Heracles, relying on his combat skills and power, defeated Diomedes. According to one of the most famous and grim legends, to tame the mares, Heracles fed them the body of their own master, Diomedes. This terrible act satiated the animals and temporarily calmed them, allowing the hero to subdue them. According to another version, Heracles simply defeated Diomedes and his warriors and then tamed the horses by force, having bound the mares with chains or simply driving them before him. Heracles began the difficult journey back to Mycenae. Subdued, but still dangerous, the horses required constant control. The hero did not relax his vigilance, holding them back. His strength and determination allowed him to successfully deliver the animals to Eurystheus. Seeing the terrible man-eaters, the king, as usual, was frightened. He ordered them to be dedicated to Hera or released into the wild on Mount Olympus. According to legend, the mares were soon torn apart by wild beasts on the slopes of Olympus, and their terrible offspring did not spread throughout Greece. In the version with Abderus, the young man was left to guard the mares, but they tore him apart, which enraged Heracles and prompted him to kill Diomedes and found the city of Abdera in honor of the fallen friend. This feat of Heracles became another testament to his fearlessness and courage. He showed that a true hero is capable not only of dealing with natural monsters, but also of restoring order in kingdoms where chaos and cruelty reign, even if it means facing the most brutal manifestations of human and animal nature. The victory over the mares of Diomedes and their master symbolized the triumph of justice and order over tyranny, cruelty, and chaos. After completing the previous 8 labors, Heracles received the 9th task from King Eurystheus to obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, the queen of the legendary Amazons. This girdle was not just an ornament, it was a sign of Hippolyta's royal power and strength as the leader of a nation of mighty warrior women and, according to legend, was given to her by Ares himself, the god of war. Eurystheus intended to give this girdle to his daughter Admete, and he sent none other than Heracles to carry out this mission. The Amazons lived in a remote and little-known part of the world, supposedly on the coast of the Black Sea, in the city of Themyscira. To reach their lands, Heracles and his companions, among whom were heroes such as Theseus, had to overcome many trials. They crossed mountain passes, fought turbulent river currents, and encountered tribes that were hostile to strangers. But Heracles, true to his path, with his tireless strength and determination, continued to move forward. When Heracles and his companions finally reached the shores of Themyscira, the capital of the Amazons, they were met with an unusual silence. The city was surrounded by mighty walls, behind which tents and towers could be seen. The Amazons watched the strangers from afar, warily scrutinizing the figures of the men approaching their lands. These women, known for their martial prowess, had long been ready for any invasion. Hippolyta, their queen, proudly emerged from the gates. Her golden girdle gleamed in the sun, like a symbol of her invincibility. Tall, slender, with a stern gaze and a spear in her hand, she approached Heracles to learn the purpose of his visit. Heracles explained his mission. Hippolyta, after listening to him, surprised everyone with her response. Admiring Heracles' fame, or simply not wanting conflict, she not only did not reject the request, but also expressed her willingness to voluntarily hand over the girdle in order to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. It seemed that everything was going perfectly. However, the gods of Olympus, or rather, the restless Hera, could not allow the feat to be completed so smoothly. Music, hating Hercules. Hera could not allow him to complete the task without a fight. She decided to intervene. Taking the form of one of the Amazons, Hera appeared among the women and began to spread inflammatory rumors. "These strangers have come to kidnap our queen. They want to destroy our city and enslave us," she whispered. The words spoken by the goddess quickly spread through the ranks of the Amazons. Anger and distrust seized them. The women, distrusting the peaceful intentions of the Greeks or their queen, began to gather weapons, preparing for battle. Crowds of Amazons flocked to Hercules' ship, their faces full of determination. Hippolyta tried to stop her warriors, but it was too late. Hera, pleased with her trickery, watched as the silence turned into a furious roar of war. The Amazons surrounded Hercules' ship, or camp. Horsewomen poured out of the city gates, with bows drawn and spears at the ready. Hercules and his companions, realizing that battle could not be avoided, quickly took up defensive positions. The Amazons were the first to engage in battle. Their arrows, like a deadly rain, fell upon the Greeks. Hercules, shielding himself with his shield and lion skin, responded with accurate shots from his bow and quickly released his own arrows in return. His companions fought alongside him, but the Amazons advanced as a single unit, using their combat skills and strategy. Seeing that they were outnumbered, Hercules decided to use his incredible power and experience in battle. He swung his club, scattering enemies like dry leaves in the autumn wind. When the Amazons surrounded him, he, according to one version, lifted a huge boulder and threw it into the crowd, scattering their ranks. His companions, encouraged by the hero's courage, continued to fight. Hippolyta, seeing that the battle only brought suffering to her people, once again tried to stop her warriors. She stood on a hill and loudly called on them to lay down their arms, but their rage was too great, and her voice was drowned out by the noise of battle. In the midst of the battle, Hercules broke through the ranks of the Amazons and found himself in front of Hippolyta. According to one version, believing that the queen had betrayed him, Hercules killed her and took the girdle. According to another, more peaceful version, seeing him, the queen realized that the war was a mistake caused by the intrigues of the gods. She stopped him, raising her hand and said, "You have proven your strength and valor. I do not want my people to suffer any longer. Take the girdle and leave in peace." In her eyes he saw wisdom and regret. He accepted the girdle and, turning to his companions, ordered them to retreat. The Amazons, finally realizing the deception, or simply obeying the will of the queen, outcome of the battle, ceased fighting and retreated to their city. This feat was not only a test of Hercules' strength and skill, but also a lesson about how easily intrigues and misunderstandings can lead to conflict. Music. Hippolyta's girdle became a symbol of victory, not only over the enemy, or obtained by agreement, but also over the intrigues of the gods, once again proving the hero's greatness. After the feat with Hippolyta's girdle, which turned into, according to one version, a bloody battle and a display of both strength and diplomacy, King Eurystheus, seeing that nothing could break the hero, decided to send him where no ordinary mortal had ever set foot. The 10th task was not only dangerous, but also almost impossible: to go to the edge of the world, to the island of Erythea, and obtain the herd of cattle belonging to the monstrous three-bodied giant Geryon. This feat became one of the most significant trials, requiring Hercules to travel to the westernmost limit of the known world, a place considered inaccessible even to the gods. The road to the west, to the edge of the inhabited world, oikumene, was fraught with difficulties. Hercules crossed the scorching deserts of Libya, where the daytime heat burned everything alive and the nights were icy. Legend has it that enraged by the unbearably scorching sun, the hero drew his bow and shot an arrow at the god Helios himself. Music. Helios, the god of the sun, instead of becoming angry, admired the hero's audacity and courage and rewarded him with a golden cup or boat that served as a ship, capable of carrying him across the turbulent waters of the ocean that wash the world. This cup-shaped vessel transported Hercules to the island of Erythea, Red Island, perhaps because of the setting sun, where the herds of purple cattle of Geryon grazed. But even after a long journey, the hero faced new trials. On the shores of Erythea, Hercules met his first opponent, Orthrus, or Orth, the two-headed dog, brother of Cerberus, guarding the herd. The beast bared its teeth at the hero with a terrifying roar. Orthrus was so strong that he could knock down a full-grown bull with one paw, but Hercules, possessing outstanding reaction and strength, managed to dodge or meet the attack and struck a powerful blow with his club, smashing both of the beast's skulls. The battle was short but fierce, and defeating the dog, Hercules proved that he was ready for new trials. After the victory over Orthrus, the herdsman Eurytion, a faithful servant of Geryon, appeared. He was a huge man, possessing brute force and animal cunning. He tried to attack the hero with his club or spear, but Hercules, fighting with the coolness of an experienced warrior, slew Eurytion with several precise blows of his club. When news of the deaths of Orthrus and Eurytion reached Geryon, the owner of the herd himself, who was the embodiment of horror, appeared on the battlefield. He was a monster who inspired awe. 3 torsos joined at the waist made him a terrifying opponent. Each torso had a separate head, a pair of arms, and a pair of legs. The sight of this 3-bodied giant would have made any mortal freeze in horror. Hercules knew that he would have little chance against 3 opponents at once in an open hand-to-hand battle. He decided to use his best weapon, a bow and arrows dipped in the deadly poison of the Lernaean Hydra. When Geryon, furious and confident in his victory, appeared on the battlefield, Hercules fired 1 or more arrows. The poisonous tips found their target, striking all 3 torsos of the monster at once and depriving him of life. Geryon represented a complex metaphor. His 3 bodies could symbolize the past, present, and future, or the different lands he ruled. The killing of Geryon became an act of asserting order over chaos, a victory of the hero over inhuman power. This battle showed that even the most multi-headed and formidable evil is vulnerable to the hero's accuracy and poisoned weapons. After defeating Geryon, Hercules gathered his magnificent herd of cattle and prepared for the long journey home, using the same golden cup of Helios to cross the ocean. It seemed that the most difficult part was over. The monstrous dog, the giant herdsman, and the 3-bodied owner of the herd had been defeated. But the trials did not end there. Hera, always full of hatred for Hercules because of his divine origin from Zeus, who had been watching the hero's every success, was enraged by his latest victory. To complicate the completion of the feat, she sent a swarm of giant horseflies, or gadflies, that attacked the cattle. These insects, according to legend, were not only large, but also incredibly vicious. They painfully bit the animals, driving them mad and causing them to scatter in different directions. For Hercules, this became a serious problem. The maddened herd scattered over a vast area, crossing Europe from Iberia to Scythia and Thrace. He had to chase after the scattered cattle throughout the area, covering vast distances. For several months, he crossed forests, swamps, mountains, and rivers, tracking down the animals. He returned each cow to the herd one by one, showing incredible patience and resilience. Some cows were so frightened that they hid in inaccessible places or even swam across seas. But Hercules, possessing keen eyesight and boundless energy, found them all, or most of them. When Hercules finally reached Tiryns, or Mycenae, with the herd of Gerion's cattle, Eurystheus, as always, greeted him with distrust and envy. However, even he could not deny the greatness of the feat. Eurystheus sacrificed the cows to Hera. Gerion's cows became proof that Hercules had managed to overcome not only physical challenges and monsters, but also the intrigues of the gods, natural obstacles, and the difficulties of a long journey. Hercules' 11th trial seemed almost impossible: to obtain the golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. These magical fruits, given by the goddess of the earth Gaia to Hera herself on her wedding day with Zeus, grew on a tree in a mysterious garden in the far west and bestowed eternal youth or immortality. The problem was not only how to get to the garden, but also that its location was carefully hidden, and the garden itself was securely guarded. The Garden of the Hesperides was a place not of this world. It was located far to the west, beyond the known lands, on the shores of the ocean, where the real world merged with the mythical. It was a place where the eternal sunset painted the sky gold, and the trees were adorned with fruits shining like the sun. The Hesperides, daughters of the Titan Atlas and the nymph Hesperus, or daughters of night, beautiful nymphs, tended this garden. But they were not its only protectors. The huge dragon Ladon, possessing 100 heads, did not sleep day or night, coiling his body around the magic tree so that no one dared to approach the golden apples. Hercules, of course, did not know where this mysterious garden was located. Therefore, he had to not only perform a feat, but also find a way to locate it. He embarked on a long journey that took many months. He crossed deserts, forests, and mountain ranges. His path led through lands inhabited by mythical creatures, and each step brought him closer to his goal, but no one knew the exact location of the garden. Along the way, he performed many other deeds, fought various opponents, freed cities and people. In one of the valleys, or on the river, Hercules encountered the sea god Nereus, or the river god Achelous in other contexts, but more often Nereus in connection with the search for the garden, who possessed the gift of prophecy and the ability to change shape. Nereus refused to point the way and tried to escape, turning into water, fire, and various animals. But Hercules held him firmly until he gave up and pointed the way to the garden, or to someone who could help. On the way to the edge of the world, Hercules, according to one version, encountered Antaeus, a giant, son of Gaia, Earth, who drew invincible strength from contact with Mother Earth and challenged all travelers to fight, killing them. Hercules fought him, but realized that he could not win as long as Antaeus touched the ground. Then the hero lifted the giant into the air and strangled him. During his search, Hercules encountered various mythical creatures and received clues about the location of the garden. One of the most important encounters was his encounter, or liberation, of Prometheus, who had been chained by Zeus to a rock in the Caucasus for giving fire to humans. Every day, Zeus's eagle came to peck at his liver, which grew back overnight. Music. Hercules, taking pity on the Titan, or at Nereus's direction, killed the eagle with his arrow and freed Prometheus from his chains. In gratitude, he revealed to him the secret of how to find the Garden of the Hesperides, or more likely, advised him not to try to take the apples himself, but to seek help from the Titan Atlas, who held the celestial sphere on his shoulders not far from the garden. Reaching the edge of the world, where the heavens meet the earth, Hercules saw Atlas. This mighty Titan had been cursed by Zeus after the Titanomachy and doomed to hold the celestial sphere on his shoulders forever. The mighty Atlas was greatly exhausted by his burden. Hercules told him about his mission and offered a deal. He would temporarily take on the celestial sphere if Atlas, who was the father of the Hesperides and could enter the garden, helped to obtain the apples. Atlas gladly agreed, seeing in this an opportunity to at least briefly get rid of his curse. Hercules took his place, accepting the incredible weight of the heavens on his mighty shoulders. Music. Atlas went to the garden of the Hesperides. He either persuaded his daughters to give him the apples or killed the dragon Ladon, although according to the main version Ladon remained alive, plucked 3 golden apples and returned to Hercules. When Atlas returned, he felt how pleasant it was to be free. He did not want to take on the sky again and offered Hercules to deliver the apples to Eurystheus himself, leaving the heavens to him. But Hercules, understanding the trickery or cunning of the Titan, showed his ingenuity. He pretended to agree, but asked Atlas to hold the celestial sphere for a moment so that he, Hercules, could put a soft cushion or lion skin under his shoulders for comfort. The unsuspecting Atlas took the heavens back on his shoulders. At that moment, Hercules picked up the golden apples and left, leaving the Titan to fulfill his eternal punishment once again. When Hercules brought the apples to Eurystheus, he, amazed by their beauty and magical power, was afraid to keep them and gave them back to Hercules. Hercules dedicated them to Athena, and the goddess returned the sacred fruits to the garden of the Hesperides, as they did not belong in the world of mortals. This feat became a symbol not only of strength and endurance, but also of Hercules' cunning, his ability to find non-standard solutions and communicate with both gods and titans as the great trials of Hercules were coming to an end. Eurystheus, no longer knowing what earthly task could stop the hero, decided to give him an assignment that seemed beyond possible for a mortal. He ordered Hercules to perform the 12th, final, and most terrible feat, to descend into the realm of the dead, Hades, and bring back Kerberos, the terrifying 3-headed dog guarding the entrance to the underworld. This task was not only extremely dangerous, but also symbolically important. It required the hero to cross the boundary between life and death and return unharmed. Hercules' descent into the underworld was not only a physical journey, but also a spiritual test, a symbol of his ability to overcome the most fundamental boundaries of existence. This feat required not only strength, but also courage, composure, and respect for the laws of the world of the dead. Immersion in the world of Hades, described in the myths, is not just an episode. It is a window into the complex and mysterious world of the ancient Greek idea of the afterlife. The path to the underworld began with an entrance, which, according to various myths, was located in various places in Greece, a cave on Cape Teneron, by the Acheron River, or in the depths of Epirus. Hercules prepared for this trial. He underwent initiation into the Eleusinian mysteries in order to learn the secrets of the underworld and obtain the right to enter and exit, set out on his journey. Divine support from Hermes, the guide of souls, and Athena radiated in his every step, but even he, the strongest of heroes, felt the tension as he approached the gates where eternal darkness and silence reigned. At the entrance, or at the Styx-Acheron River, he was met by Charon and Cerberus, the first guardians of the underworld. Charon, the old ferryman of souls across the river, was a frightening figure. Music. He transported only the dead, receiving payment, obol, for a coin placed in the mouth at burial. Hercules, although alive, thanks to his fame, strength, and perhaps threats, or the help of Hermes, managed to convince or force Charon to carry him across the gloomy waters. The waters of the Styx were not just a border. They symbolized the transition from life to death, the moment when even the greatest heroes felt their mortality. Crossing the river, Heracles saw a world unlike anything he had known. The shadows of trees stretched into endless darkness. The air was thick and heavy, and the earth seemed devoid of life. The souls of the dead wandered around, silent and incorporeal shadows. It was a world devoid of time and light, where everything seemed frozen in eternity. The shadows recognized the hero. Some turned to him for help, or simply watched with surprise. Among them were the souls of great heroes and villains, ordinary people, and even some deities, punished for their misdeeds. This world was not only the realm of the dead, but also a place where posthumous justice was done. The souls of the virtuous went to Elysium, and the villains to eternal torment in Tartarus. Okay, here's a translation of the text, aiming for a natural and engaging tone like a native English speaker. Heracles journeyed deeper and deeper until he reached the throne of Hades, the ruler of the underworld, and his consort, Persephone. Hades, enveloped in a somber atmosphere, was stern and majestic. His realm wasn't a place of evil in the Christian sense, but its rules were absolute. Like his brothers, Zeus and Poseidon, Hades held unquestionable authority in his domain. Hades listened intently to Heracles' request to bring Cerberus to the surface, and to the hero's surprise, reacted with a certain restraint, perhaps knowing Zeus's will or simply respecting the hero's strength. He knew he wasn't dealing with an ordinary mortal, but a hero destiny had elevated above the common folk. Hades agreed to the request, but on one condition. Heracles had to subdue Cerberus without any weapons, relying solely on his strength, and without seriously harming the beast. Cerberus, the guardian of the gates to the underworld, was more than just a three-headed dog. His appearance inspired terror. 3 heads, able to watch in different directions simultaneously, a mane of hissing snakes, a serpentine tail that whipped with incredible speed, and a roar that made the earth tremble. He was the embodiment of the underworld itself, a relentless guardian who allowed no living soul to enter without permission and no dead soul to leave Hades' realm. Heracles found him near the exit of the underworld, vigilantly guarding the gates. Spotting the hero, Cerberus snarled, his 3 maws bared, ready to attack. Heracles, however, didn't flinch. Remembering Hades' condition, he laid down his weapons and cautiously approached the hound, studying its movements. When Cerberus lunged, the hero deftly dodged and grabbed him by the necks, or rather, all 3. Feeling the beast's incredible power, Heracles held on tight, straining every muscle. Cerberus thrashed, roared, and tried to bite the hero, but Heracles, protected by his lion skin and possessing superhuman strength, was unyielding. Using his strength and endurance, he managed to subdue the monster, squeezing him so tightly that the dog finally submitted. Cerberus yielded, acknowledging the hero's strength and will. When Heracles brought Cerberus to Eurystheus, the king was thrown into utter terror and cowered in his trusty Pythos storage jar, begging Heracles to take the monster back. Eurystheus realized that Heracles had accomplished a task that no one else could have and acknowledged the completion of his service. Heracles kept his word. He led Cerberus back to Hades and returned him to his post as guardian. Hercules' descent into the underworld and his return symbolize victory over fear, death, and the unknown. This task became the culmination of all his labors, proving that a hero can overcome any obstacle, earthly, heavenly, and subterranean, if he relies on his strength, intelligence, and determination. This feat not only completed Hercules' series of trials at Eurystheus' command, but also established him as the greatest hero, whose deeds inspired generations. The descent into the underworld became a symbol not only of physical strength, but also of spiritual fortitude, a reminder that even in the face of death, courage and hope can be found. Hercules, whose strength and exploits made him an immortal legend, found himself in one of the most unexpected and humbling periods of his life after completing the 12 labors. This phase, his servitude to Omphale, Queen of Lydia, wasn't just an episode in his story, but a crucial lesson in humility and inner growth. To understand what happened, we need to revisit how he ended up in servitude and consider how this trial transformed the hero. After accomplishing his 12 labors, Hercules thought his troubles were behind him, but fate had prepared a new ordeal for him, one linked to his indomitable temper. One day, he became entangled in a tragic series of events. While visiting King Eurytus of Oechalia, or after Eurytus refused to give him his daughter Iole in marriage, promised for winning an archery contest, Hercules, in a fit of rage or madness, perhaps once again triggered by the goddess Hera, killed Iphitus, the son of King Eurytus, throwing him from the city walls. This act was a terrible violation of the sacred law of hospitality, one of the fundamental principles of ancient Greek ethics, as well as the murder of an innocent. Aware of the gravity of his transgression and suffering from an illness sent as punishment, Hercules went to Delphi to seek counsel from the oracle of Apollo. The response he received was disheartening. He could only atone for his guilt through 3 years of servitude. Furthermore, he had to be sold into slavery, and the money earned from his sale was to be given to the relatives of the murdered Iphitus, although Eurytus refused to accept it. Thus, Hercules, the most powerful of heroes, by the will of the gods, Hermes sold him, found himself in the slave market, where Omphale, Queen of Lydia, bought him. From that moment began one of the most unusual and controversial periods of his life. Omphale was the ruler of Lydia, a kingdom in Asia Minor known for its wealth and refinement. She was not only a beautiful woman, but also a wise ruler who knew how to govern her people with determination and justice. However, her name has been forever etched in history because of her relationship with Hercules. The queen was fascinated by the mighty hero, but instead of using him solely as a warrior slave, she transformed him into her companion, and according to some myths, her lover. However, she loved demonstrating her power over him, which led to several comical and paradoxical situations depicted in art and literature. Hercules' life at Omphale's court was strikingly different from his previous exploits. Music. If he had once battled monsters and fulfilled the orders of gods or kings, now his work involved performing traditionally feminine duties. Omphale forced Hercules to spin wool, weave, and even wear women's clothing, while she herself donned his lion skin and carried his club. This image, the mighty hero dressed in women's attire and engaged in crafts, became a symbol of humiliation, but also of a peculiar transformation. Hercules, accustomed to solving problems with his incredible physical strength, was forced to realize that there are trials in life that require patience, obedience, and humility. This period, however strange it may seem, played an important role in his spiritual development. He learned to control his anger and submit to the will of another. Despite his situation, Heracles continued to perform heroic deeds even in slavery, showing that his heroic essence could not be suppressed. For example, he rid the lands of Lydia of bandits or wild creatures, the Circades, who robbed villages and threatened the locals. On another occasion, he defeated a huge serpent that was ravaging the country. Thus, even in conditions that could be considered humiliating, Heracles remained himself. He found ways to demonstrate his best qualities, even when the circumstances seemed stacked against him. Serving Omphale became a time of redemption and humility for Heracles. Omphale, being a symbol of female power and authority, and perhaps wisdom, played an important role in Heracles' development as an individual, teaching him to control his untamed power. When the 3 years of service came to an end, Heracles was freed. Omphale released him, perhaps even marrying him for a time or bearing him children, according to various versions. He reclaimed his attributes, the lion skin, the club, and his former glory. However, this experience changed him forever. He became not only stronger in spirit, but also wiser, realizing that even the greatest heroes can find themselves in a position that requires humility and inner growth. This period reminds us that every trial, however strange or humiliating it may seem, can be a step towards spiritual growth and self-understanding. After his time in servitude to Queen Omphale, where Heracles, strangely enough, found humility and a new understanding of his place in the world, he once again sought a path to living an ordinary human life, as much as that was possible for him. One of the most touching and ultimately tragic chapters in his later story was his marriage to Deianira and the subsequent finale, which marked the culmination of his earthly existence. Deianira was a princess of Calydon, the daughter of King Oeneus. She was renowned for her beauty and wisdom, but as often happens in myths, happiness couldn't be achieved without a struggle. Not only Heracles sought Deianira's hand, but also the powerful river god Achelous. Heracles had to fight him to win the right to marry her. Achelous was a formidable opponent. He could take on different forms, including turning into a snake or a bull. Heracles engaged him in a fierce battle. It was a clash of strength against cunning and magic. Achelous used his ability to change forms to deceive the hero, but Heracles ultimately defeated him, famously breaking off one of his horns in the duel, which, according to one version, became the Horn of Plenty. This victory became a symbol of his supremacy. After his victory, Heracles married Deianira, and their marriage initially seemed happy. They decided to leave her father's palace and move to a new city, Trachis, where they could start a life together. However, Heracles' life was never simple. Even when he sought peace, fate was preparing new trials and fateful encounters for him. On their way, Heracles and Deianira approached the turbulent Evenus River. Here, they encountered the centaur Nessus, who offered his help in crossing the river. He offered to carry Deianira across the rushing waters on his back, while Heracles swam across the river himself. But as it turned out, the centaur was treacherous. After carrying Deianira across, he tried to abduct her, thinking he could take advantage of her helplessness and beauty. Hearing his wife's cries, Heracles, without wasting time, drew his bow and struck Nessus with one of his deadly arrows poisoned with the venom of the Lernaean Hydra. The dying Nessus devised a cunning revenge. He convinced the gullible Deianira that his blood, mixed with his semen, was a powerful love potion that would guarantee that Heracles would always remain faithful to her. Nessus told her to collect his blood, omitting the poison of the Hydra it contained, and store it as a means to preserve her husband's love, music. Deianira, fearing future infidelities by the lustful Heracles, secretly collected the centaur's blood, unaware of its true properties, and hid it away, assuring herself that one day she might use it if she felt she was losing her husband's attention. Soon, Deianira's fears were justified. Hercules and Deianira's married life began to unravel. Hercules, known for his passion and proclivity for infatuations, after one of his campaigns, the war against Oechalia, where he avenged himself on King Eurytus, captured the beautiful Iole, the daughter of Eurytus, the very woman for whom he had once killed Iphitus. He brought her to his home in Trachis, clearly intending to make her his concubine, or even his new wife. This affair was the last straw for Deianira. Remembering Nessus's words, she decided to use the love potion to regain her husband's affection. Deianira soaked a luxurious chiton robe of Hercules' with Nessus's blood and sent it to her husband through the servant Lacus as a gift for the festival celebrating his victory. But she didn't know that the blood was mixed with the deadly poison of the Hydra. When Hercules donned the cloak during a sacrifice at Cape Sinium, the heat from the altar fire activated the poison. It began to seep into his body, causing unbearable torment. His skin burned, his muscles contracted in agony, the chiton stuck to his body, and attempts to tear it off only resulted in tearing off pieces of flesh. No source or magic could alleviate his suffering. In rage and agony, Hercules killed Lycus, the bearer of the garment, throwing him into the sea. Soon, Hercules realized that there was no salvation, and his earthly life was coming to an end. Realizing that this was the end, he decided to meet death with honor, as befits a hero. He ordered himself to be taken to the summit of Mount Ota and prepared a funeral pyre there. Hercules lay down on it and asked his friends or companions to light the fire, but no one dared to do it, unable to raise a hand against the greatest hero. Finally, a shepherd or hero named Philoctetes, or his father Poas, agreed to light the pyre. In gratitude, Hercules gave him his famous bow and arrows, which later played an important role in the Trojan War. As the flames engulfed his body, a miracle occurred. Amidst the thunder and lightning from Olympus, a chariot descended, sent by Zeus, possibly driven by Athena or Hermes. Instead of perishing in the fire, the mortal part of Hercules burned away, and his immortal divine essence ascended to Olympus. There, Zeus granted him full immortality. He became a god, and his place was among the greatest Olympians. Upon learning of her fatal mistake, Deianira took her own life. On Olympus, Hercules awaited a meeting that would ultimately determine his future fate. Hera, whose wrathful persecution had accompanied him since his birth, was among those who welcomed his arrival. It was a unique encounter. Hera, who had inflicted countless sufferings and trials on Hercules, now looked upon him with respect, acknowledging his divine status. Her hatred for Hercules was caused not so much by his actions as by the fact that he was a living reminder of Zeus's infidelity, the son of the supreme god and the mortal woman Alcmene. When Hercules achieved immortality and became equal to the gods, the reason for the enmity disappeared. This moment symbolized that even the strongest and longest-standing conflicts, such as hatred and jealousy, can be overcome through the recognition of merit and a change in status. Hera not only recognized Hercules as a hero and a god, but also formally adopted him as a member of the Olympian family, performing a symbolic rite of adoption. Their reconciliation became a symbol that conflict can end if both sides are willing to acknowledge each other's strength and dignity. To solidify Hercules' new status and finally reconcile him with Hera, Zeus granted him Hebe, the goddess of eternal youth and beauty, as his wife. Hebe was the daughter of Zeus and Hera themselves, making her union with Hercules a symbol of the final reconciliation and acceptance of the hero into the family of the gods. Hebe embodied everything that Hercules had been deprived of in his turbulent and suffering mortal life: peace, harmony, and eternal happiness. She not only became his divine companion, but also maintained his eternal youth. With her help, Hercules left behind his earthly sufferings and attained long-awaited immortal bliss. According to myths, Hebe was the cupbearer of the gods, serving nectar and ambrosia, which symbolized eternal life. Now she shared this blessing with Hercules, making his immortality complete and joyful. Where the past no longer has power, on Olympus, Hercules found his rightful place among the gods. His new status meant that he was no longer a hero fighting for survival and redemption. Now he became one of the Olympians, a protector of mortals, a patron of strength, courage, and athletic competitions. His name became synonymous with overcoming difficulties, and people throughout Greece, and later in Rome as Hercules, began to pay him divine honors, building temples and offering sacrifices. Hercules as a god became a symbol of hope for those who struggled with adversity. His story inspired heroic deeds, and temples dedicated to him became places where people sought blessings and protection. Hercules' ascension to Olympus is not just a myth about the reward for heroic deeds. It is a story about how a person, albeit a demigod, after going through unimaginable pain, suffering, and trials, can achieve divine greatness through perseverance and redemption. Hercules became an example of how strength of spirit, humility before fate, when necessary, and a relentless pursuit of a goal can overcome any obstacle, even death itself. This finale reminds us that even the greatest sufferings can lead to triumph, and great people leave a legacy that inspires forever. The story of Hercules teaches us that greatness is measured not only by victories, but also by how a person copes with defeats and mistakes on their path. Hercules did not simply enter Olympus. He became part of a great story where gods and people, sufferings and triumphs intertwine into a single narrative of human strength and divine greatness. Dear friends, our amazing story has come to an end. We have gone with Hercules through all his trials, sufferings, triumphs, and defeats. I have shown you how a man, born from the union of a god and a mortal woman, was able to overcome all the obstacles that fate threw at him and ultimately earned a place among the immortal gods. Hercules is more than just a mythical hero. He is a symbol of human resilience, strength of spirit, and the ability to cope with adversity. His life is a story of how difficulties can become stepping stones to greatness, and mistakes can become lessons that shape character. The exploits of Hercules remind us that each of us can be the hero of our own life. We all face difficulties, but it is in these moments that our strength, courage, and determination are tested. Like Hercules, we learn on our way, become stronger, wiser, and closer to our dreams. The story of Hercules has survived for millennia. It has become the basis for countless legends, works of art, and philosophical reflections. Even today, thousands of years later, it continues to speak to us, resonating in our hearts. After all, each of us can see something of our own in his struggle, striving for a goal, overcoming oneself, or finding our place in the world. We have seen how Hercules rose from mortal hero to immortal god, and his ascension to Olympus is not only the culmination of his path, but also a reminder that greatness is achievable if you believe in yourself and continue to move forward despite the difficulties. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me. I hope that this story has inspired you and allowed you not only to learn more about ancient Greek mythology, but also to reflect on your own strength and capabilities. And may the spirit of Hercules inspire you to achieve. His resilience support you in difficult times, and his triumph remind you that great victories await those who are ready to fight for their dreams. With that, my lecture concludes. Thank you for your attention, and see you again soon.